In this video, we're going to go through on how to incorporate emotional kind of elements within a mix. But before we get started, my name is Ed, you're watching Stokes Sounds. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe and leave a comment. And if you want to support the channel, head over to our website, stokessounds.com. Now let's dive in. So I've got a track here. It's by an artist called Luke Stefano. It's a song called Perfect Mother. It's off his latest album and it's a new single off the album. And he really wanted to portray this kind of emotion in the song itself. He didn't want kind of too much processing. He wanted it to be quite organic and just allow the lyrics and the melody just to kind of sit on top and just flow nicely for the listener. To create that sort of thing, you've got to really incorporate kind of automation, change of scenery with reverbs and that kind of stuff. Now, you don't have to go too complicated on it, but there are things where you want to kind of create dynamic changes and differences. And the way to do that a lot of the time is by automation. It is the secret to kind of creating life in mixes. You'll find a lot of the time these days, a lot of mixes, they're quite flat because, you know, people aren't using mixing desks like myself. You know, I'm all in the box. But there are ways that we can kind of do some tricks and tips and all of that sort of stuff to really enable us to get that kind of sound that we're after. Let's actually just take a listen to the track itself so we can hear kind of what we're working with, and I'll break down some things that I did in the mix to bring out that emotion that he wanted.
So put a light inside of your mind. I know it hurts, but it'll be alright. It's just words, but they're waiting inside. They're in your soul, or they're in another life. 'Cause God is only missing out on.
So you can hear that, you kind of get the vibe of the song and kind of where it's going. And one thing that I did in this mix, which I think, you know, is something to really look at when you're mixing your own stuff, or, you know, you're mixing other people's stuff, is the use of automation. I think a lot of the time these days, there's a lot of static mixes, and that's partly because not many people are mixing on mixing desks like myself. I'm mixing in the box, and, you know, you're using mouse and keyboard, and it's not the same as using a fader. So, you know, there are kind of ways in which we can kind of use touch automation and trim automation to kind of just bring things up and down, and you know, you can use a mouse. It is better to use a fader. I do have like a fader port down here which you guys can't see, but it's the PreSonus fader port, and I kind of slowly kind of massage kind of the volumes going in and out. But in this case I actually did it with a mouse, and I can see that because it's in kind of blobs and sections, and if you're using a fader it's more kind of free flowing, but it works with the mouse in this case. And I know most of you guys are using keyboards and mouses and not mixing desks, so it's more relatable. So you can see here, if you look, you've got the lead vocal up here, and then you've got the automation volume above. Now I'm doing this post the plugins, which is why it's on the lead vocal, because I don't want the plugins to affect. So if I'm turning up the volume of the audio, you know, the vocal, I don't want that to hit the plugins differently. I wanted to process the vocal how I liked it and then create the emotion with volume. There are multiple ways you can do it. You could do it pre the plugins if you wanted to, but it's just a different sound, and in this case I didn't. I just did it after, but you've got to experiment and try and, you know, and see what you like. So if we actually just solo the lead vocal, you'll see on the volume, as it gets to kind of halfway through the chorus, I've got like a build up here in the automation phase. And this is just bringing out certain words, you know, that I wanted to kind of emphasize to the listener. So if we just have a look and play it again, solo the lead vocal, you'll see this volume, it will increase as he's singing certain words.
Be alright. It's just words, but they're waiting inside. They're in your soul, or they're in another life. 'Cause God is only missing out on.
You heard that whole section there, that was kind of brought up, and that was because I wanted to hit it on certain phrases, and that because, you know, that could be because of the certain words or the arrangement that was in the track. You know, I wanted that vocal to be louder. So as you saw there was a little increase, and you notice I'm only doing, you know, maybe half a dB or a dB. I'm not doing huge dramatic changes, even though it looks like it because I'm zoomed in on it. But if you look, it's actually quite minimal. Luch self-produced this, he self-recorded it, he didn't track with a compressor, so the vocal was a little bit more dynamic than maybe I would have recorded it with a compressor. But that's not to say that you need a compressor to record vocals, because in this case, as you can see, you can get a great sounding song without a compressor, outboard recording compressor, I mean. And you can see, again, the automation has followed it in the backing vocals. So if we have a listen to the backing vocals at that point, and then let's listen to the automation volume, or let's see what we're doing.
It's just work, but they're waiting inside. They're in your soul, they're in another life.
So you saw there when he said it's just words they're waiting inside on that lyric, I wanted to emphasize that, and I wanted to bring that harmony out. And as you can see, I started at minus 4.6 dB and I went all the way up to minus 1.9 dB. So, about a 3 dB difference. Maths isn't my strong point, so hopefully that's around a 3 dB difference, but let me know in the comments if it isn't. But you can see there, it's very, very subtle things. And, I've gone through the individual harmonies here. I've lifted some volumes up.
Words, but they're waiting inside. They're in your soul, they're in another life.
Again, that's just creating emotion in the harmony. You don't always want your songs to be super flat and super compressed, and this is one way to really bring that emotion out. And as you heard from the track, it's quite an acoustic style track, and as I say, you want that lyrics to be really kind of forward in the mix, and so to really capture that emotion and that kind of feel. Like, mixing is all about feeling, right? You've got to feel what you want the listener to feel, and it's the same. Luch is singing an emotional way, and then you want to have your mixing kind of complement that. You've got to think about the actual song itself and not just think about technical aspect of it, because it's very easy just to use multiple plugins, compressors left, right and center, compressing 20 dB compression and all of that kind of stuff, which there are times and a place where it's good to do that if you're doing it on a purpose. But I do see a lot of people have 10 vocal compressors on a vocal just to make it loud, and all it's doing is just squashing the dynamics out of the vocal. You're not getting the emotion out, which the singer did. They're using mic movements, they might be leaning back a little bit or leaning forward depending on how they're singing, and you have to take that into consideration. Mixing is a little bit more than just slapping plugins on and balancing levels. It's all about the fine details, as you can see here. So that's kind of one element that I do to create emotion in the mix. The next element is automating different reverbs. If we have a look here, you'll see that I've got a plates reverb muted, and I'm bringing it on in the choruses. As you can see on the Pro Tools session, you can see on every chorus there is a new reverb added to the chorus, and that's because I wanted to kind of add a new space, a new kind of atmosphere to his vocal. So if we have a look, you can see here I've got a room reverb going on, and I don't even know what the room reverb is, I can't remember now. Let's have a look. The room reverb is just the standard Pro Tools deverb. It's just a small room. That's just to give him some ambient. Knowing Luch, he would have probably recorded this in some sort of bedroom or a home studio, and so there wouldn't have been much kind of atmosphere within that space that would be nice for the ears. If you're recording at, let's say, Abbey Road or Metropolis in a big space, you're going to have that natural room ambience. But in smaller studios or bedrooms, you don't have that. So I wanted to kind of create a little bit of a small reverb, and I'm not talking a dramatic difference from like a bedroom, but just something just to add a bit of flavor. So if we have a listen to the lead vocal in solo and then bring up this room reverb, you'll hear what that room reverb is.
So put a life inside of your mind. I know it hurts, but it'll be.
So that's just adding that kind of room space. If we have a listen when the in verse 2, for example, when the plate reverb isn't in,
Should have your eyes, and he would hold the strength that you've always had. And in time.
So again, just adding a little bit of ambience, a little bit of space, just so it's a bit more pleasant to the listener, so it's not kind of too kind of like, oh, that sounds a bit unnatural. I wanted to create the naturalness of it. And then as you notice, you can see, like for example, in verse 3, this room reverb is on. But then as it comes into the chorus, you can see that I've then bring in a plate reverb. Now the plate reverb sounds like this.
So put a life inside of your mind. I know it hurts, but it'll be alright.
So, you can see that that's got a little bit of a, a little bit more of a longer decay. It just increasing the space, and it's like you're stepping into like a different world. Again, these differences are really, really subtle. I'm not trying to make dramatic changes. There are times and places to do that, but I'm just doing very small, minute changes between the verse and the chorus to lift it. Now, the listener may not even realize it's a different reverb, but they'll feel it without knowing that they're feeling it. It's that they are the small things in mixing that makes all the difference. So if you have a listen with the lead and the harmonies together going from verse 3 into the chorus, notice how when he gets to the chorus there's a little bit of a lift. And again, you've got to train your ears to really hear the lift, but you'll definitely feel it even if you're not sure exactly what's going on.
I know it hurts, but it'll be alright. It's just words, but they're waiting inside. They're in your soul, or they're in another life. So put a life inside of your mind. I know it hurts, but it'll be alright.
So you can really hear that. Again, it's subtle, but you can hear the decay of that reverb that just kind of comes in on that last chorus, on all the choruses. It creates this space and this feeling. You can do the same thing with delays. Luch wanted to keep this mix quite simple. As I say, he wanted it to be natural. He didn't want it to be kind of too much processing going on because he wanted to keep away from the natural feel. And you probably noticed that the vocals are not kind of perfectly in sync, in the sense of I've left them quite organic and quite raw on purpose, and and because you don't want to kill the live vibe of him playing guitar and singing. You want to keep the naturalness, if that's even a word, naturalness. I think it's a word, but you want to keep that kind of organic element of how it should be. If you listen to records back in the 50s or 60s, it was very much get 4 musicians or whatever in a room and just play it out, put the mics up, and it sounded great. There was none of this kind of all this editing and all this tuning, which is fine to do and it's great to do, but there are certain songs where it's kind of nice when it's not always perfect. So you've got to really take that into consideration as well. And you'll notice that on the harmonies, to give it a little bit more of a space, I then bring in a Picardi reverb, which is probably the 7th Heaven. Maybe I've changed it. Let's have a look. Yes, it's the 7th Heaven, and I bought in a chamber, Sunset Chamber preset. Maybe would have changed the decay time to fit the song better. But you can hear that if you listen to the harmonies going on.
So put a light inside of your mind. I know it hurts, but it'll be alright.
So as you heard there, it's a bit more of a bigger reverb. It's more like a lot more decay. There's a lot more kind of, space and kind of, it's a much wetter room or reverb sounding kind of space. And I wanted that because that really complemented the lead vocal. If you make your backing vocals kind of really wet, you're going to push your lead vocal forward. And as I said earlier, that he wanted the kind of the vocal and the lyric to be quite forward and intimate. So if you have all the backing vocals, very dry, and they're sitting on top of the lead vocal, everything's going to be kind of very close to you. But by adding kind of a lot more reverb and a lot more of a bigger decay time to the backing vocals, you're making that kind of separation between the lead and the backing vocals much more, create more depth. And that's kind of where it goes on to creating a bigger depth in mixing. And people always want that 3D image, and it's using early reflections and all of that kind of cool stuff with the space in the mix. So that's kind of a few ways that I kind of go about adding emotion to the mixes. If we just have a listen to the kind of the verse going to the chorus again with everything in, and you can hear it with the production, how that sounds, and then it's just all about experimenting. So let's take a listen.
I know it hurts, but it'll be alright. It's just words, but they're waiting inside. They're in your soul, or they're in another life. So put a light inside of your mind. I know it hurts, but it'll be alright. It's just words, but they're waiting inside. They're in your soul, or they're in another life. 'Cause God is only missing out on a perfect mother. 'Cause she would mean the world, no doubt, to a son or daughter if she could love a little one. Then maybe she'd love herself the way she should, the way I would if I could, the way she should, the way I would if I could.
So as you heard there, from verse 3 to the end of the song, you know, you can really hear how the harmonies and the reverb and, you know, the reverb decay really builds up, and it kind of goes all the way up and then it kind of drops back down to just acoustic guitar, and then it goes to a cappella. And again, this is just creating emotion, dynamics within the song itself. And, you know, you can really hear like his voice, the tuning isn't exactly perfect, but it has like a grasp and an organic kind of thing to it that just makes you go, oh, that sounds really, really good. And it really makes you focus on the lyrics. That's the goal. It's focusing on the song. Never lose sight of what the song is. A lot more over what plugins I'm using. You know, all of that stuff is great, and it's, you know, people like us that love mixing, that's, you know, good, but you always have to think of what is the end goal. What are you trying to achieve in your mixes? Are you trying to achieve dynamic space, different kind of atmospheres? Really think like that when you kind of mix your songs, and you'll find that you'll get more emotional mixes and you'll be happier with them, and you know, people will hopefully love them, and all of that great stuff. And that's it. That's how I approach creating emotion in my mixes. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and also if you've got any questions about kind of how I process and how I do automation, then do leave them below as well, and I'll get back to all of you, and I'll see you again next week for another video.